Welcome to Africa's Game Changers. This is a podcast where pretty much we talk to a lot of amazing Africans doing amazing things. So that can be literally anybody from youth who see them like doing so many initiatives. And today's podcast is especially special to me since it's like a subject that I'm very passionate about, which is like mental health. So mental health in Africa, essentially. So the past, present, and future. And yeah, thank you for coming on board, Tari.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate
it. I guess to get started, here's like you pretty much tell us about yourself. Can you like tell people about who is Tari and why should he actually be on this podcast? Because I was just like, oh, there's a lot you've done that I've seen. I'm just like, I'm really excited to share with like the whole audience about that.
Well, my name is, my full name is Tarisiro Fundira. I am a recent graduate at the University of Manchester. Part-time, I work on a social enterprise which encourages people to use these communication skills, specifically debating, to relieve people from the social injustices within education in the UK. I also write spoken word poetry where I speak into, let's say, the hard things of life, and I put a bit of a spin in those poems. But I think most importantly, and maybe why I've been invited to do this podcast, is because of my initiative on CreateZim, specifically the mental health initiative, which I lead with a couple of people, including Nyasha Goredema. Shikomborero used to be there too. But this is very, very dear to my heart because we use literally an online platform which statistically has proven to cause the biggest mental health issues as a form of healing and as a safe space. Because I guess similar to my poetry, I want to speak in anything and like flip it on its head and show people that we can be countercultural and we can heal, specifically with a taboo topic like mental health.
Awesome. Yes. I remember first seeing CreateZim. I think it was like last year. My friend pretty much shared like the profile. Was like, oh, you should go on there and CreateZim because I think you forgot to say. And I joined the Far From Home series actually, which was very interesting. Which is like, oh my gosh, a lot of other people are pretty much facing the exact same thing that I am. So that's really interesting. As a Zimbabwean, it's also just like, oh, this actually helped me in so many ways, connecting with other people. But what made you actually start CreateZim?
So CreateZim was originally a youth organization. It was not started by myself. It was started by Shikomborero, Nyasha, and another person I don't know of. They were originally a youth organization. They reached out to me because they wanted to expand into some form of social responsibility. They didn't really know what exactly they were thinking along the lines of depression, but they weren't too sure what. And I myself, having had lost a brother due to suicide, and that was as a result of mental health issues, because he was depressed, but he didn't know who to share it with, because in the context of Zimbabwe, I can't speak of Africa as a whole, but expressing your emotions, especially as a man, especially as the oldest child, you'd be seen as weak, you'd be seen as inferior. You just can't do that. You can't bring the family name down. And so I was like, okay, what is this issue? What is mental health? I looked at the African Development Policy and I saw that it was neglected in three specific parts. That was in regard to the stigma behind it. The other one was just plain ignorance. And the last one was the fact that, okay, if mental health does exist, can it actually be treated? And I was like, okay, the mental health initiative for CreateZim is going to target these three things specifically. In terms of the stigma, there's only a big stigma around it because nobody talks about it. So why not create these online series like Far From Home, which acts as a vehicle to facilitate the mental health conversation? So instead of starting with, let's say, a a online series, which is I'm depressed, let's talk, we were like, no, everyone has mental health. So likewise, that our online series, our titles of that series have to be open and relatable to every single person. And so, for example, being far from home, lots of people, I assume university students, sometimes even high school students, or people working overseas can feel like they are far from home, disconnected from their, I guess, their home. And through that, through talking about the experiences and the coping mechanisms, they realize it's affecting their mental health. And what it does to the viewers, they see, oh, wow, you know, Michelle is going through X, Y, and Z. I never knew she went through that, but this is what she's doing to cope with that. And maybe I can apply the same thing. And then in regard to the ignorance, we also want to educate people. As you know, in Zimbabwe, it's a very taboo topic. So we partner with the Zimbabwe Psychological Association, and they monitor, provide content, and support our page. Within this whole, I guess, topic of mental health. And we produce animations such as the ABCs of mental health, where we show the basic fundamentals of what is mental health, what is mental illness, is there a difference, things like that. And then lastly, to deal with specifically the treatment, we have a hotline where anyone who looks at our Instagram, Facebook pages can call this hotline and find support, not from us because I'm not a professional. People in my team, they are psychologist students, but they aren't professionals. And so the Zimbabwe Psychological Association monitors this hotline, and those people who call in can receive support accordingly.
Wow, that's amazing. I can definitely vouch for about how this series has like pretty much opened my eyes to some things. A few people have actually reached out to me after I did my own episode on that. And they sort of wanted to like know more about how I handled stuff as well. So that was pretty interesting, that I got to talk to like so many different people, and that I myself actually reached out to a few friends because of the series. So it's actually really helping, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like that's the whole point. We want people to like share their stories, to get it off their chest. Because obviously we know that sometimes you can like keep things in and it can build up, and we don't want it to, you know, all come out at once. But the fact that you share your story, people can see you. And hey, I might not be as approachable as someone like you, Michelle. And some people can be like, what? I can engage Michelle in this conversation. And so what it does, like CreateZim's like namesake, we are a community organization. So we don't want to just give you the content. We don't want to just give you the conversations like you're doing yourself. We want to create a community where we're facilitating these conversations.
Yeah. So I guess to go back to what you mentioned briefly about how in Zimbabwe mental health has been seen as this whole taboo type of issue. I guess my question would be, how have you seen like mental health issues actually affecting Zimbabwe more on like a societal or economical level?
So in terms of society, what you can see is like within the workplace, a lot of people are always, you know, talking about the issue of money, and it is a real thing. I guess it both, I guess it also speaks into the economic side, but I guess socially, whenever you're doing things, everyone's thinking on the back of their heads, can I afford this? Can I afford this? Can I afford this? And obviously because of the, I guess, economic turmoil our country's in, it does add on to mental health issues a lot, because you literally have so much uncertainty. Similar to this pandemic, you just don't know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And I've personally seen it in my friends, in my parents, you know, a sense of stress, a sense of anxiety. Can I really live hand to mouth every single day? And that's, yeah, I think that's really hard. And also looking broadly more at society, just looking at our history, we've gone through so much trauma as a country. We've had, obviously, you know, we were colonized. We had Gukura Hundi. We had all these wars and all these struggles. But there was no platform, there was no space to actually deal with it. And so, you know, you look at the World Health Organization, which says in 2017, Zimbabwe was ranked number 19 in the world for deaths by suicide. Wow. And like it's really sad, and I think obviously there are many components to the actual fact, but I think one of them is the neglect of mental health, specifically because of the economic strain on the country.
Yeah.
Specifically also because culturally, if I have mental health issues, we keep it within the family. Zimbabweans like to deal with things within the family before they go out there, because maybe there's a certain image, there's a certain reputation we need to keep up. And so because, yeah, there are not that many statistics or information or studies done specifically on that. I can't give you actual numbers, but I think in terms of like just cultural norms and the economic turmoil and neglect of acknowledging both of those things has caused a lot of mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Zimbabwe gained independence 40 years ago. That's very young. That's just pretty much my parents' age, actually. And then Africa as a whole is a very young continent. Literally, I was just thinking about this with my friend as he was describing what his own parents went through during the colonization period and how they fought in the war. And a thought came into mind. Well, just like, wait a minute. If a lot of these leaders are the ones who were actual freedom fighters during the wars, how many of them actually went through all these stresses, all this radical tension, and how has that affected them mentally? And then how has that correlated with how they're governing Zimbabwe and other African countries? And it was just like, for me, it was a light bulb moment. It's still a very opinionated thing as there's no evidence base, but it was just like, okay, so a lot of our leaders have gone through so much that they have not properly dealt with. And Zimbabwe, as you said before, everybody likes to do things privately. And publicly, it's like everybody has a smile. Like when people actually come to Zimbabwe, that's one thing that they always say, that everybody's so friendly, everybody is smiling. And it's just like, how can people be smiling in the situations that many are facing? And it's one of those things where it is very taboo to talk about mental health. Even in my own family, we have dealt with relatives with mental health issues, and it's a very sensitive topic as well, because it's just like nobody wants to admit that there's something going on. Even personally, like with my own journey, it's like I only realized that, oh wait, I went through anxiety and depression like only last year. It was like my childhood. I went through all of that, but it took somebody else, like an actual psychologist, to point that out. So it's very interesting seeing how Africa as a whole, not just Zimbabwe, that there's a statistic that actually says that about 80% of all mental health issues are in developing nations, and a lot of them are in Africa. I guess my next question for you would be, we are currently like in lockdown. What are you hopeful for, and what scares you the most about this lockdown in terms of mental health?
That's a very good question. So what I'm hopeful for is obviously conversation. So we are trapped, let's say, in between our four walls or in between our homes, or some of us with our families, some of us with our friends, our flatmates. It now means that the walls can go down. It now means that like that thick skin can actually peel off and we can talk about these things. Because it's just going to be a time where what I've found, there's like a cycle in lockdown. You have this period where you're like, okay, it's not that bad. A month goes and you're like, okay, it's really bad. I miss my friends. I need that human interaction. And then a month goes and then you're just like, oh, it is what it is. And so there's a big fluctuation of emotions. And I think now what I'm most hopeful for is, Michelle, this is the only time, I believe, where everyone in the whole world at the same time is thinking about mental health. Yeah. I'm sure lots of people, specifically in Africa, Zimbabwe, never thought it actually existed. But now when they've lost routine, when they've lost normality, when they've lost how to, let's say, do their work, when they're seeing their spouse or their children or their partner every single day, every single hour, they can see it affecting them in ways they never thought life could affect them. And so I'm hopeful for conversations to start happening, because I believe that once conversations happen on a micro level, it can expand it can change the wider narrative. I think too many of the times, you know, society or the world likes to hit things with the headlines, with social media. Like first we post on social media and we post on the news and there's something big. But I think sometimes when we post something big on social media or something big on the news, yeah, people see the headlines, but they aren't really affected by it too much unless it's obviously something within their context.
Yeah.
But I believe through this lockdown, if we have those micro conversations, if I talk to you, you talk to your friend, you can then see a change, a revolution on the topic of mental health through these small conversations. Because now there's like a sense of accountability. Now, because you've told me your mental health issue, I can check up on you, and vice versa. If it just goes, you know, in the headlines, it's just those people over there. Or if it's you, you keep it within the family, you know. But in regards to what I'm most scared about during lockdown, I would probably say abuse. I think, or I've heard, talking to some of the psychologists within the Zimbabwe Psychological Association, calls on abuse, gender-based violence, drug abuse has all increased. And that's obviously as a result of one, not having anything to do. So like a passive mind ends up really maybe doing things they won't want to do, or ends up trying to find a form of, let's say, pleasure or entertainment or escape. Actually, yeah, that's it. Escapism. I think all these things, drug abuse, sometimes gender-based violence, it all comes from a sense of escapism, a sense of trying to escape reality. And in like the worst case scenario, that escape, I guess, syndrome or escapism could result in trying to escape from their lives, and unfortunately might lead to suicide. So I think that's what I'm most scared of. Like, how do you escape? How do I escape? Some people escape through watching Netflix. Some people escape through smoking, through other, I guess, recreational things. So yeah, I'm just scared about people's, in quotes, coping mechanisms, but might really be escaping mechanisms.
Wow, that's very interesting. In terms of the hopeful part, there is something that I just thought of. It's called the Friendship Bench. I believe that's like an also an initiative that's happening in Zimbabwe that's gained like a lot of international traction as well, in terms of like how those small communities are actually providing people like with an ear so that they can speak about their issues, and how, and this is done on a local with like nurses and health professionals, which is really interesting that that is actually kind of happening now in this time when it's like needed the most with the pandemic. And the fearful part, yes, it is scary that a lot of people are now stuck. They're literally have like nothing to do. Some of them have gone through a lot of job losses because a lot of jobs are being made redundant, unfortunately. Then there's also gender-based violence. So there is a lot happening within lockdown itself. And then if you have to also think about Zimbabwe's own situation, that so many people are facing the actual issue of starvation. It's kind of like, I don't know if this is necessarily true for everybody. It's like, how do people kind of shift from that focus? It's like, okay, I have to think about my mental health, or I'm just operating in like survival mode. Like I just need to like get food on the table. I need to just be on the grind, because there's a lot of, I feel like a lot of Zimbabweans are used to that kind of like mode. It's like, I just need to be on survival mode. I don't have time to think about my mental health issues. I don't have time to think about anybody else's mental health issues. I just need something to keep me to be alive, essentially, which is very interesting. I guess my question for you is like, with this growing traction, with Zimbabweans becoming more aware of mental health, what do you think are like some of the steps the government itself or some of our leaders can take to support this, to support your initiative or to
Right.
support more people actually coming forward? Like, we need to actually focus on mental health because it's proven that it not only affects individuals but it also affects the economy. If people are more if people feel more like attached to their own mental health, if people are feeling better about themselves with their health, then that's actually proven that it actually increases productivity on like a job skills, actually increases a lot to do with economic levels. So yeah, so what are some ways or some steps do you think the government could take to do that?
Yeah, very, very good question. I think primarily is acknowledgement. So one, acknowledgement that mental health is a thing, it exists, and there needs to be awareness on that. But also two, the acknowledgement of a intergenerational gap. I think, like you said, there's this big gap between those who were born before, let's say, independence and born after independence. I think there's a very big divide. Also because a lot of the mental health issues have also come due to social media, due to the anxiety of all these different platforms where people are, in essence, trying to better or, you know, like level off one another to compete with one another. That's created a whole sense of, I guess, mental health issues. So I believe that the change must come with education, but that education can only become if you have a form of a committee or like at the moment, the World Health Organization is doing a special initiative with some of the mental health partners in Zimbabwe, including CreateZim. But we are one of the, I think we might be the only youth mental health partner in this initiative, and we're drafting up a program for mental health within Zimbabwe from 2020 to 2023. But the special thing that they're doing is they're trying to have obviously that professional touch, but also the youth aspect. So in terms of the government, they need to realize that their average age in Zimbabwe is, 18 and a half years, right? So it means most of the people who are affected by this mental health issues are younger than them, probably 40 years younger than them, 30 years younger than them. They probably cannot relate, to have no idea what these people are going through. So drafting up forms of curriculums, workshops with the youth, because the youth understand how the youth think. However, the government have the resources, the wisdom, the maturity, and the professionalism. But what the youth can provide is the real, like, I guess, the realistic or just like the perspective of the youth and the experiences of the youth and the feelings of the youth. Because I think once those two are interconnected, especially within, I guess, education systems, where you are being like taught about mental health, what it is, when to notice things, how to support other people, I think that could be very beneficial. But one thing also to bear in mind is, I think, I'm not too sure the statistics, but I think most of the people within Zimbabwe, which are lower class, don't even reach education up to, like, let's say, O levels. And so we need to be thinking about systems which work to also facilitate the majority, because if we're honest, the minority are really within the education systems. And so how are we going to facilitate those conversations or mental health specifically within the rural or the lower classes? And things like Friendship Bench do such a good job in terms of having a bench and having a grandmother and facilitating that talk therapy, that listening, and that comforting and that support. And I think more initiatives like that would really help. But again, also integrated with the youth, because the Friendship Bench use grandmothers to facilitate the conversation, because obviously grandmothers are in every local community, hey? But just imagine if they weren't just grandmothers, they were also, young students. Because if you think about it, these days, with the average age of Zimbabweans being 18, a lot of people a lot of 18-year-olds, 16, 17, 15-year-olds look up to those high school people, those young adults, those influencers, people like Ten Diamond, people like Mikey.
Yeah.
And so it's getting them like form of brand ambassadors. The Mikey, Gem, Tammy Moyo. It's getting them to talk about mental health and them to go into both these places, privileged and underprivileged, and facilitating those conversations. Because once you do that, I think you've seen as human, we like to copy one another, monkey see, monkey do. Once we do that, we want to emulate these influencers. And if they are mental health ambassadors and facilitating that, I don't see why others wouldn't want to do the same.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest influences for Zimbabwe, I'm not sure what for other countries, is religious institutions. How do you see them facilitating this? Because previously, as you've mentioned before, that it is a stigma in Zimbabwe. So you hear a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, just pray about it," or just or go to the spiritual healer for like any mental health issue. How do you see churches or other institutions actually taking a stand and being like, okay, there are other ways for us to step up, or we can actually step up and facilitate this better?
So that's a very good question. I think here I'm not speaking on behalf of CreateZim, but more on behalf of my personal capacity. I personally believe that witchcraft, kuroiwa, those things are very real. Those things do happen, and they can cause mental health issues. So it's really good to acknowledge that. People might be superstitious and acknowledge it all the time. Finding that balance, I have no idea how to find that balance, but it's good to acknowledge that kuroiwa, it does happen. These things do happen. It is real. And we should acknowledge that. But trying to also realize that while you can have someone perform witchcraft or like over you, there's also an issue of mental health. And so I personally believe mental health is has the imbalance of, let's say, chemicals in the brain, and that's causing you mental health issues. I do think, yes, it is a physical issue, and that can happen, and you can get, let's say, specific tablets, medication to balance those out, to maybe numb the pain. But while that is a reality, I also think the spiritual sense is a reality, specifically as a Christian, because as I believe, and sin came into the world, there was fracture. Everything wasn't how it was supposed to be like. And that sin isn't just a physical reality, but it's also a spiritual reality. And I think that causes many mental health issues. So religious institutions, how they can facilitate that, acknowledgement. I think many people, many religious institutions don't even acknowledge mental health and just say, just pray about it. And like, I guess I can speak for the Christian community. I do think, yes, praying about it is good. Praying about it should happen. But it's not pray about it and like mental health doesn't exist. It's like your mental health does exist. You are loved. You are known by this church community. And we want to pray for this issue. But most importantly, and I think this really attracts people to the Christian faith, is the whole relational aspect. Like Jesus came out with relational beings. He facilitates conversations. And in the same way, we're talking about Zimbabweans not wanting to open up those conversations. It's about, serving one another and listening to one another and having those conversations. And I think if the church, if other religious institutions had an open space just to talk specifically with like, did you hear what? Ningi? No, just to talk, just to facilitate that, to acknowledge that, and then to pray for that. I think with that model, mental health could really be tackled.
No, that's beautiful. I guess lastly, this is how we always end our episodes with. we asked this one question. So, by definition, a game changer is an event, an idea, or procedure that affects a significant shift in the current way of doing things or thinking about something. What is one game changing idea that you have about the future of Africa?
One game changing idea I have about the future of Africa.
Yeah.
Um, well, I'd firstly like to acknowledge, thank you for having me on this podcast. But in terms of like being a game changer, and I'm really privileged for you to, I guess, even recognize this. But I personally don't see myself as a game changer. I believe, if anything, it's like my faith, which is living inside of me. I think my faith, like I was saying before, seeing that the world used to be a certain way since coming to the world, it's not a certain way now. And so I think that game changing mindset actually comes from a core being or a core thing that was put within us from God. So I think God is the real game changer. And I think for Africa, what he really wants to see is, funny enough, less dependency on other, like, let's say, countries or places or beings. I know within Zimbabwe, lots of people put pedestals, let's say, on the prophets, on, let's say, the United Nations and the World Health Organization. But my game changing, or I believe God's game changing, I guess, an idea or initiative for Africa is to show people that, like, no, I don't want to just give you a fish and make you just dependent of me. Is no, I want to equip Africa, to have the resources to make Africa or the world how it was supposed to be originally. And how that could look like practically is us, the same way Christ walked alongside his disciples, is us walking alongside other classes, other races, other genders, alongside them, talking to them, seeing them as equal. Just like Jesus did, he came to serve. And so I think through that serving, we can make Africa a continent which looks like a continent like how it was supposed to be before all of this came into the world. So I believe it starts by attacking the issues that people don't want to talk about. Classism, particular in Zimbabwe. That is real. That is a thing. In order to change that, I think we all, including myself, need to be humble, acknowledge it, walk alongside people, and really show, I guess, the world what the world was supposed to look like.
That's amazing. So for people who want to like support CreateZim, the initiative, how can they do that?
So 3 specific things. The first one, just like the page, like if you vibe with our content, share it, repost it, tell your friends, tell your parents, most importantly, so they understand what's happening, what's going on with you, what's going on with the world. Secondly, if you have an organization, if you are a person and want to partner with us, if you want to volunteer, DM the page or DM my account or message my account or email us. Would love for you to volunteer. Would love for the whole of Zimbabwe to volunteer, really. And the last one is, if you are in a position to donate, we are trying to make a phone application which can tackle specifically the issue of mental health within Zimbabwe. So Zim-centric solutions for Zimbabwean problems. I can't reveal too much about that, but get excited. And so any form of donation via EcoCash, PayPal, GoFundMe, whatever it is, like, we would appreciate it so much. And I guess lastly, tell us when we do things wrong. We want to learn. We know we're not perfect, but we really want to, get to a better place where we can facilitate and help people journey towards positive mental health.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this wonderful episode that we had with you. It was very insightful. Very insightful, actually. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best with this. And I really hope, I guess, the game has changed.
It will. I'm very positive about the future of Africa, especially with the youth now, as we have the youngest workforce, we have the youngest people on the planet, and we're learning from so many different countries and continents. I feel like Africa's youth is actually taking a stand. And it's always amazing to talk with other youth because when you're in it, you don't see it. It's only when you actually start getting out of it, you start talking to people, it's like, wait a minute, there's small things happening, but they're happening at the same time, which is going to cause like ripple effects, which is going to cause like a whole mass thing happening within the continent. So it's very exciting. So it's really exciting, and I'm very hopeful about Africa in a few years from now.
I'm glad and I'm hopeful too. Michelle, thank you so much for your time.